On a cold morning in northern Britain, nearly 2,000 years ago, 5,000 Roman soldiers marched into the mist. They carried the silver eagle of one of the most feared legions in history. They had crushed rebellions, conquered nations, and marched across half the known world. But that morning, something happened. Something Rome refused to explain. Because by the time the sun rose the next day, the 9th Legion was gone. Not defeated, not retreated, gone. And the empire, which obsessively recorded every coin, every grain shipment, every soldier's death, said nothing. No funeral, no monument, no name carved in marble. 5,000 men, erased. For 19 centuries, historians have hunted for the answer. They've dug through battlefields, translated lost inscriptions, cracked stone tiles found 1,000 miles from where the legion was supposed to be. And what they're starting to uncover is worse than a massacre. Because the more we learn, the more it looks like the 9th wasn't simply lost. They were unmade by Rome itself. This is the story of Legio Nona Hispana, the 9th Spanish Legion, and the deliberate silence that swallowed them. To understand what happened, you need to understand what they were. Not just soldiers, not just an army unit. The 9th was one of the oldest fighting forces in the Roman world. They had served under Pompey the Great, fought beside Julius Caesar, conquered Gaul, crushed Spain, terrorized Britain. They were veterans, survivors, killers with reputations carved into stone across 3 continents. So how do you lose 5,000 of them and bury the truth so deep that 2,000 years later we're still arguing about it? The answer takes us into the darkest corner of the Roman Empire, a corner Rome did not want anyone to find. The 9th was born in blood. Their first records appear in the chaos of the Roman Republic, more than a century before the empire even existed. They marched under Pompey the Great in his eastern campaigns, and when civil war split Rome in half, they were absorbed into the army of a young, ambitious commander named Gaius Julius Caesar. They followed him into Gaul. They watched him cross the Rubicon. At the Battle of Pharsalus, when Caesar destroyed Pompey's army and rewrote the future of the Western world, the 9th was there, bloody, exhausted, victorious. Caesar trusted them. He praised their discipline. He gave them land in Picenum after their service, a reward reserved for legions that had earned the deepest loyalty of Rome's most powerful man. But loyalty in Rome was a dangerous gift, because once you fought for an emperor, you belonged to him. And the empire that was about to be born had a long memory and an even longer reach. Under Augustus, the first emperor, the 9th was rebuilt, reorganized, sharpened into a permanent professional unit, and stamped with a name that would follow them for the next 2 centuries, Hispana. The Spanish. They earned the title in the brutal Cantabrian Wars, fighting tribes in the mountains of northern Spain who refused to bow to Rome. It was savage warfare. Ambushes, mountain passes choked with bodies, villages burned to the foundation stones. When it was over, the 9th had broken the last serious resistance in Spain, and Augustus rewarded them by sending them where Rome needed killers most, the frontier. They were stationed in Pannonia, then Africa, then back to the European borderlands, always at the edge of Roman power, always among the first to bleed. By the time the 9th was sent to Britain, in the year 43 AD, they had been fighting Rome's wars for nearly 100 years. They were not afraid of an island. They should have been. Britain, to the Romans, was the end of the world. Beyond the white cliffs lay forests no Roman had walked, tribes no Roman had named, gods no Roman understood. The Emperor Claudius wanted it for the prestige of conquering what even Caesar had failed to hold. The invasion force included 4 legions, and the 9th was among them. They landed, they marched, they burned, And for years they pushed deep into the British interior, building forts, slaughtering chieftains, dragging tribes into the Roman system one ambush at a time. But Britain did not break easily, and in the year 60 AD, the island gave the ninth a wound that would haunt them forever. Her name was Boudica. She was a queen, a widow. The Romans had whipped her in public and assaulted her daughters, and she answered with fire. She raised an army of more than 100,000 Britons and burned 3 Roman cities to the ground. When the 9th Legion marched out to stop her, they were ambushed, cut to pieces. Their commander barely escaped with the cavalry. The infantry, most of them, were slaughtered in the open. Roman historians admit the loss, but only briefly, almost ashamed. Tacitus calls it a disaster. The 9th had to be reinforced from Germany just to keep existing. They survived, they rebuilt, and they did not forget. For decades after, when the 9th marched, they marched with a debt to repay, and Rome made sure they got the chance. They were sent further north, into the wild lands beyond what is now England, into the cold, mist-soaked frontier of what the Romans called Caledonia, the land of the Picts, the land where Roman legions went to disappear. By the year 108 AD, the 9th Legion had a permanent fortress at Eboracum, the city we now call York. Inscriptions from this fortress survive, stone slabs carved with their name, records of construction, tiles stamped Leg 9. They were one of the most powerful units in northern Britain, the iron fist of Roman authority in a region that had never fully accepted Roman rule. And then, sometime between the year 108 and the year 122, the records stop. Just stop. There is no battle described, no defeat mourned, no reassignment listed in the standard imperial records. The fortress at York is taken over by another legion, the 6th, brought in fresh from Germany. And the 9th is simply gone. No funeral inscriptions, no monuments, no mention in the great Roman histories that survive. For a unit that had existed for nearly 2 centuries, that had fought beside Julius Caesar himself, the silence is staggering. It would be like the United States Marine Corps simply ceasing to exist tomorrow, and every newspaper, every official, every public record acting as if they had never been there at all. But here is where the story gets stranger. Because the silence isn't total. There are clues, small ones, scattered across the empire like breadcrumbs, left by someone who wanted to be remembered, but didn't dare speak too loudly. And one of those breadcrumbs was found, of all places, in a quiet town in the modern Netherlands, a town the Romans called Noviomagus, and we call Nijmegen, roof tiles, stamped with the mark of the 9th Legion. Tiles that, by every official account, should not exist. Because if the 9th was destroyed in Britain, how did its bricks end up 600 miles away, on a riverbank in continental Europe? Who carried them there? And when? This is where modern historians split into camps, and where the mystery deepens into something much darker than a single lost battle. Stay with me, because the truth, when you start putting the fragments together, may rewrite what we thought we knew about the Roman Empire itself. The first theory is the oldest, the romantic one, the one that has inspired novels, films, and 100 late-night campfire stories. The 9th, this theory goes, marched north from York into Caledonia, into the highlands of what is now Scotland, to crush a rebellion. And there, in some unnamed valley, in some unrecorded battle, they were ambushed by Pictish warriors and annihilated. No survivors. The eagle standard lost forever in a peat bog. Rome, humiliated, scrubbed the disaster from official memory rather than admit that an entire legion had been destroyed by a tribe of painted Britons. It is a powerful story, and for over 100 years, it was the dominant explanation. The problem is, there is almost no hard evidence for it. No mass grave, no weapons cache, No contemporary account from any Roman historian saying a legion was wiped out in Caledonia in this period. The romance of the lost eagle survives, but the archaeology does not back it up, which forces us to consider darker possibilities. The second theory is colder, more bureaucratic, and in some ways more disturbing. It says the ninth wasn't destroyed in Britain at all. It was quietly redeployed, moved south, then east, fed piece by piece into other wars Rome did not want to advertise. The Nijmegen tiles support this. So do scattered inscriptions naming officers of the ninth that pop up later in places like Germany and the Danube. Some historians now believe the ninth left Britain around the year 120, marched across Europe, and was eventually sent to the eastern frontier to fight in a war that would become one of the most catastrophic in Roman history. A war Rome lost so badly it tried to pretend the loss never happened. A war fought against a people Rome had already crushed, and crushed again, but who simply would not stay broken. The war in Judea. In the year 132 AD, the Jewish population of Roman Judea rose in revolt under a leader named Simon bar Kokhba. It was the third major Jewish revolt in 70 years, and it was the most brutal. Bar Kokhba's fighters drove the Romans out of Jerusalem. They minted their own coins. They held the country for 3 years. The Roman response was apocalyptic. The Emperor Hadrian sent legion after legion into Judea, and the casualties on both sides were staggering. Roman historians admit, in rare moments of honesty, that Rome lost so many soldiers in this war that the emperor refused to use the traditional victory phrase in his letters to the Senate, "I and my army are well." He could not say it, because his army was not well. His army had been butchered, and one Roman writer, Cassius Dio, lists the legions known to have fought in the war, but the list is incomplete. There are gaps, units missing, ghosts in the record. Some scholars now believe the ninth was one of those ghosts, that after surviving Boudica, after surviving Caledonia, after marching across the empire, they walked into the deserts of Judea and never walked out. There is a third theory, older, less popular, but it refuses to die. The Parthian theory. In the year 161 AD, slightly later than the others, but possible if the ninth was disbanded in stages, the Parthian Empire to the east attacked the Roman province of Armenia. They destroyed an entire Roman legion in a single battle, slaughtered the commander, burned the eagles. Roman sources are vague about which legion was destroyed, and ancient historians who tried to trace it ran into the same wall. Someone had edited the records. Someone had decided that the unit's name would not be spoken again. If that legion was the ninth, and several modern researchers argue it could have been, then their final stand was not in a misty British glen, but in the burning sands east of the Euphrates, fighting an enemy Rome had never truly defeated. So which is it? The forests of Caledonia? The streets of Jerusalem? The deserts of Mesopotamia? Maybe none of them. Maybe all of them. Maybe the ninth was bled in stages, pieces lost in Britain, more in Judea, the last fragments swallowed by Parthia, until there was no legion left to remember. But here is the question that haunts the historians who have spent their lives chasing this story. The question that, once you ask it, you cannot stop asking. Why did Rome erase them? Rome celebrated its dead. Rome built monuments to legions that lost. Rome remembered Varus and the 3 legions destroyed in the Teutoburg forest, and did so loudly, publicly, for centuries. The empire owned its disasters. It learned from them. So why was the Ninth Legion treated differently? Why this specific, almost surgical silence? Some scholars have begun to suggest something extraordinary, something that, if true, changes the way we understand the Roman state itself. They suggest that the ninth was not just lost. They suggest the ninth was punished. In Roman military law, there was a penalty so severe it was reserved only for the most catastrophic dishonors. It was called damnatio memoriae, the damnation of memory. When a unit or an emperor or a powerful family fell into disgrace, the Senate could vote to erase them. Their names were chiseled off monuments, their faces hammered out of statues, their existence officially denied. It was a form of execution that reached beyond death, a way of killing a legacy. There is evidence, circumstantial, but striking, that something like this may have happened to the ninth. Their name disappears from the official army lists used by Roman bureaucrats. Other legions of similar rank are still recorded long after. The ninth simply isn't, as if someone reached into the archive and pulled the page out. If this is true, and it remains a contested theory, then the ninth wasn't only destroyed by an enemy, they were destroyed by Rome, erased for some failure, some mutiny, some humiliation so deep that the emperors of the time believed it was better to pretend they had never existed than to admit what they had done, or what had been done to them. There is one final fragment of this story that almost no popular telling includes. In the late 20th century, archaeologists exploring the desert frontier of Roman Egypt began documenting graffiti, names scratched into the stone of remote outposts, the board signatures of soldiers stationed at the edge of the empire. And in one of those outposts, deep in the eastern desert, a researcher reportedly found a name. A single name. A centurion, with a unit designation that read, in faded Latin, Nona, the ninth. We do not know when it was carved. We do not know if it was real. We do not know if it was a transferred officer, a forger, or a man writing the name of his dead unit out of grief. But it sits there, on that desert wall, like a whisper from a legion that supposedly never existed past the year 120. A man, alone, in a desert, carving a name no one was supposed to remember. What happened to the Ninth Legion? The honest answer is that we may never know. The records are gone. The bodies are gone. The eagle is gone. What survives are fragments, tiles in Holland, gaps in lists, a centurion's name in a desert, and the silence, the deliberate, surgical silence of the most powerful empire in the ancient world, choosing to forget 5,000 of its own. There is something in this story that goes beyond the Romans, something that reaches across centuries and grabs us by the shoulder. Because every empire that has ever existed, keeps its secrets the same way. It does not lie. It simply stops speaking. It does not destroy the truth. It buries it under bureaucracy and time and 1,000 small omissions until the truth becomes a shape made of absences. The Ninth Legion is the shape of one such absence. We see them by the hole they left behind, by the silence in the records, by the spaces in the inscriptions. They were soldiers, they were husbands, they were fathers. They had names, and the empire they died serving decided their names would not be spoken. So speak them now, even if we don't know what they were. Speak them, because every silence we accept makes the next one easier. And history is not what we remember. History is what we refuse to forget. If this story moved you, the Ninth Legion is only the beginning. Across this channel, we are uncovering the empires that rewrote their own past, the dynasties that buried their dead, the kingdoms that forgot themselves on purpose. Subscribe, and we will go deeper. Because somewhere out there, in some other ruined desert, on some other forgotten wall, another name is waiting to be read.